Welcome to this edition of Simsbury School News. My name is Dominique Avery. Thank you for joining us for our annual budget show, where we focus on not just the schools and the school budget, but the town budget as well. With us today are Peter Askham, Chair of the Board of Finance, Mary Glassman, our first Selectman, and Matt Curtis, our Superintendent of Schools. Welcome. I'm delighted that all three of you are with us today.
It's great to be here.
Thank you for having us.
Careful viewers of SCTV have been able to follow the very public budget process in the various meetings of the Board of Selectmen, the Boards of Education and Finance, either in person or here on SCTV. But we're going to assume today that many of our viewers have not yet paid such close attention. So with Peter, let me start with you. I would like you sort of to explain to the people of Simsbury who have not been paying such close attention, what is the budget process? How does it work? It's quite unique in the town of Simsbury.
Yes, it is. Actually, our board we started off in November having a public hearing on just trying to listen to people before the budget process on what their concerns were and thoughts. We then sit down and we set some goals that we wanted to do this budget time, which is a different approach than our board's taken in the past. So we tried to set some goals. One of them was to keep a mill rate competitive with other towns. So we're trying to keep the mill rate at zero or decline, decrease if we could. We then communicated that goal to the boards, Board of Selectmen, Board of Education. We also usually give them a range of like expenditures, where we want them to be, and after we discussed where we thought was a reasonable range, and we start off with, let's say, 1.5 was the range we were talking. We then asked them to do stretch goals, or to go down to 1% and 0.5%, just to see.
Stretch going down.
Stretch going down, right.
Right.
For them to stretch, that if they could go lower, what would it mean? What impact would it have? So we asked both boards to come back with the impact of obtaining stretch goals. So that's kind of how we started it. We had the conversation with them, and then we did our work on our boards because we had a goal for ourselves. In the past, we've always kept, we call it the collection rate, just it impacts the way taxes are determined. And we've kept it the same for many years. I've been on 18, and I think we've changed it once or twice since I've been on. So we decided to look at that this year. So that would give some tax relief too, how we came out. So we gave ourselves a goal to work on that.
Can I interrupt
Sure.
you? The collection rate, what does that mean? The rate of that people pay taxes? How many people pay?
Well, what we use in the budget process is, you set a grand list, and then we have to make an assumption as to what percent of that's going to get collected. So that balances the budget with the revenue item. The two boards come up with the expenditure side. We have to look at the revenue side. So that's the main focus. About 90% of the revenue is what comes from the grand list. So we assume a certain percent is going to get collected. We have looked at that, and our board decided to change that 0.5 point more, which helps, and you'll see the final outcome, helped in the final outcome to get a better tax number for everyone. So we debated that. We also met with our advisors, just as an oversight board. The Board of Selectmen, we have our pension obligations for both the Board of Ed and the Board of Selectmen are set by our actuaries, Milliman, so we had our actuaries in to talk about how that goes, investment rates of return. We also had our bond rating agency in just to talk about if we could change the collection rate and adequacy of reserves, talking about our debt policy. So we went through all the basics that we have to do, challenged our board to get reasonable numbers and how to get tax relief for everyone. So I thought it was a good exercise. I thought it came out well. Both boards, in our opinion, they gave us their budgets in the last 2 weeks, or a week and a half, I believe it's been. And they both came down to their stretch goal, one of their stretch goals, which we were delighted. So we were very happy that they were able to make one of the stretch goals. So even though we gave them 1.5 points, they came down around 1%. As you'll see with the Board of Selectmen, there was a little something from a budget issue in the past kind of clouded it up a little, so it's not as simple as that, but in our mind, they came in with their goal. They did a very good job. So we were delighted on the expenditure side, and we've looked at the revenue side to hopefully give some tax relief there.
So it seems to me that before we get into the town and the education budget, that this process is quite unusual and extraordinarily careful. just the whole budget process and how, I mean, to me, I'm from a bigger city. First of all, there's not so much transparency. Second of all, you never have any idea what's really in the budget, and here it is so carefully managed.
Well, I think it's good. I think Simsbury was wise, and I know they do charter revision every so often. I think, a couple of years ago they changed the charter. But basically, the Board of Finance is an elected board, oversight board. So both budgets of the Board of Selectmen and the Board of Education have to get approved through the Board of Finance to go on to the voters to get passed in referendum. It used to have a town meeting. We now have a referendum that came in, 10 years ago. We didn't always have that when I started out. And so that's a good process that the voters ultimately decide at referendum. Everyone gets the vote. But we do have an important role that has to come through us. We try to ask basic questions, keep it a concept, and are we in the right concept to get a good result for the taxpayers? So we challenge the boards in that. We try to stay out of the individual areas. Occasionally we get into it, but we try to allow them freedom to run their budgets their way to meet the programs and the way they feel fit, because we're not professionals in those areas. They are.
Okay, so now we're going to turn to them. Which one of you wants to go first, the town budget or the Board of Education budget?
Well, since mine's smaller, maybe I should go first.
All right, that's fine.
Thank you, Dominique and SCTV, for having us. This is a very important process, as you say. Our jobs are to try to find what level of services to offer our taxpayers and make recommendations as what they should pay for it, because after all, it's one budget for town and school services, and we really see it that way. And we try to offer the best, most efficient services we can for the price that folks pay. So that's how we started our discussions. And I do publicly want to thank the Board of Finance and the Board of Ed and the Board of Selectmen and the Board of, who are working so hard to really make those, scrutinize the budgets and really make those important decisions to keep our services quality services, but yet be mindful of our taxes that we pay here in Simsbury. We, on the town side, are 1/4 of the overall town budget, and folks may not...
It's like an $18.8 million
Yes,
budget.
$18.8 million. And, folks may think that the Board of Selectmen has authority over the entire budget, when in fact, what this show is explaining, as you're helping, is that the town budget and the Board of Education budget need to go through a process where the Board of Finance actually has final authority. So that's important to know. We have been working really close together with the Board of Ed to try to find ways to provide efficiencies so we won't have to cut basic services. And I think that's really important for our taxpayers to know, because when you look at the drivers of both of our budgets, there are tremendous pressures for increases, whether it's pension increases, healthcare increases, just the cost of salt that we saw this winter, utilities. And so we're under constant pressure to increase our budgets because of the costs and the obligations that we have with our staff, our contracts, and other areas. Well, what we did first, I think, is really phenomenal, is that we've been working over the last 6 years to have the town and Board of Ed employees come under the same insurance plan. It sounds kind of simple, and it sounds like something that would be easy to do, when in fact, because there's so many different bargaining units, it actually took a long time to work with our staff. And I think it's a credit to both our town and education employees that they were willing to work with us, make sure that we could come to a compromise and agreement to provide the same carrier for both. So this year, one of our goals collectively was to try to not increase the cost of taxes, but yet offer efficient services. And one of the primary ways we were able to do that is because we had tremendous savings in consolidating carriers. That saved us in excess of $500,000, both on the town side and the Board of Education side, which we used to offset those costs that we spoke earlier of. So I'm really thrilled. I'm proud that the town budget has really remained close to zero or not decrease. That's in order to accommodate some of the quality education services that we need to have. And we've introduced efficiencies. So this year, again, consistently, we've taken the Board of Finance guidelines and actually come in under those guidelines. And that provides some relief to our taxes. And this year, with the savings and the fiscal conservative budgets, I think we'll see a really good budget to bring forward to the taxpayers for a referendum. So we're really excited to bring that forward in April for public hearing on April 10th, and then to the referendum in
So
May.
this show is going to continue airing after April 10th, but the
Great.
hearing will be at the high school on April 10th.
Yes.
Amphitheater.
And the
Amphitheater.
amphitheater at 7:30?
7.
And then after that, people will have the opportunity, as you mentioned, to vote in a referendum. I believe that's on May 6th, and that's at Henry James.
There'll also be another meeting, in probably a town hall on April 16th, another public hearing on the budget, in which our board will finalize the budget at that time. After we listen to all the concerns at the public hearing on the 10th, we'll probably finalize it on the 16th. It gives voters another chance to come out and express their opinion. To us, we'll have public audience.
So before we go into Matt and the education budget, so the bottom line is that from what Mary has said and what you said initially is that you're hoping there will not be a mill rate increase and there will not be a tax increase this year.
The way the magic mill rate sheet works right now is with grand list growth, with the decreases that both boards were able to find with their joint savings, and the Board of Finance changing the collection rate between those three events, I think we're going to have a small tax decrease for the first time that I've been on. I've been on 18 years, so.
Wow.
Breaking news.
Wow,
And
breaking
Peter doesn't go
news.
anywhere without that sheet.
So a small tax decrease.
Small tax decrease.
And
it
that's
looks
the
like
first
now.
time?
Right.
Yeah, first time I think any of us can remember.
Yeah, I only go back 18 years of actively being on, but it's the first time we've been below zero. And I think, 1 or 1.25 was the lowest tax increase before that. But I mean, it just, we're starting to get grand list growth. You're starting to see some grand list happening. And it gets better every month, which is good.
And that's what people forget about. I know we want to get to the Board of Ed budget quickly, but one thing that we also look at, we always focus on the expenditure, but the revenue side is just as important as we talked earlier about, because our economic development efforts, our form-based codes, our focus on bringing more business in the North End, the new urgent care center, that also is providing relief to our taxpayers. This is the first time in 4 years we've had any grand list growth. And again, that also helps. You lower expenditures, you increase revenues, and you get what we're getting this year, and that is no tax increase.
Okay, so we do have breaking news here.
Breaking news.
Yes, you do.
So Matt, now we're going to turn to the Board of
Sure.
Education. That's where often there is the most pressure,
Right.
because there's a very large community of people who use our schools and who are used to very high standards. So we're not going to see a tax increase. How did you manage that this year?
Well, I think, Mary talked about drivers, and we all have main drivers in our budget. And I think we did a great job collectively, I think, clarifying what the goals were early, up front, and had a lot of conversation along the way, probably more than we have in the past, which I think was nice to see. The challenge, much like Mary for me, is we have high standards, and how do we continue those standards, not impact our services in a negative way, and try to meet the needs and try to reach the stretch goals as Peter talked about them. So Mary already articulated one of the main drivers for us was that insurance consolidation. So quite honestly, that allowed, I think, our Board of Education to feel comfortable about the fact that we could move from what was initially a 1.5% increase, which we felt comfortable meeting the needs of our students and the program responsibilities that we had. We were able to make that reduction down to a 1.05 with the insurance consolidation alone. And I think that for us, again, the collaboration between both the Board of Ed and the Selectman's office is something we need to continue to think about. So that was, I think, exceptional on both our parts. The other piece is the decline in enrollment that we've been seeing. And this isn't unique to Simsbury. We've seen probably about, I think, I did an analysis, comparable towns, about an 8% decrease over the course of the past 3 to 4 years in enrollment. That really allowed us to offset our other most significant driver, which were a people business. So, we had roughly, with new contractual obligations, about $1 million in salary increases. We were actually able to reduce 12 positions. And when we reduce positions, an important value of our board is to make sure our class sizes don't go above guidelines. And we were able to do that. So we were able to offset just about that entire salary increase with reductions in kind of attrition and enrollment that will
Because
offset.
of declining enrollment.
Because of declining enrollment. So while there are reductions and you look on paper and you kind of say, wow, that's pretty drastic, the reality is our class sizes will be in good shape. They have been in good shape the past several years. That's been a value of our board. I know our parent community as well, especially with all the changes in reform in education, that we keep, reasonable class sizes for our kids. So those two main drivers enabled us some flexibility, quite honestly, to even kind of put in some funding for things that we needed on this year in particular on the special education side.
That's what I was going to ask you about, because I know there's been some pressure there. You made fairly substantial reductions a few years ago. Am I correct about that? And
well, it was more of a reallocation, actually, is what it was. We went to a different service delivery model for our reading intervention. So we did have significant reductions on non-certified paraprofessionals, but we also hired certified reading teachers in that place.
so
But it was a bit of a balance.
So what are the additional special, I know there's pressure on special ed.
Sure.
What are
So,
the additions?
really in two areas. We have a specialized program that services a certain segment of our autistic population called Ready, Set, Go. And that's housed in Squadron Line School, and it's housed at Tooten Hill School as well. So it's been a very successful program to include our students in the mainstream, but give them the discrete services they need as well. We just saw explosive growth in that program since the beginning of the year. So a 22% growth alone in that program had put us in a position where we needed to respond current year with support services that we then had to budget for adequately next year. So that's in the area of professional development. We also put in a program director, a kind of an oversight person, to kind of help manage that program and serve as a conduit between our teachers, our students, and our parents.
Just to go off topic slightly, I
Sure.
also, there's a reduction in buses, a couple of routes or a couple of buses?
So we took a hard look in presenting our initial number, again, was at about a 1.5% increase. Of other places, we call them operation efficiencies. We're transporting 400 to 500 less students than we were several years ago on our buses. Now the trick is the space doesn't get any smaller, but we need to look at route consolidation, look at some bus route consolidation, worked very closely with our transportation people in Salters, and we feel we can take 2 buses offline, which we can save about $80,000 from doing that.
As a former member of the Board of Ed, I remember those bus reductions were always very, very thorny, and parents got quite upset about changes.
Yeah.
So have they been done in consultation with parents, or are parents likely to get upset about it?
I think we've been careful in how we've looked at where we can consolidate routes. We haven't, asked for parent input in that area, but it's so complex in terms of when you're looking at all the streets and everything else. But the realization that we're running the same number of buses as when we had 600 or 500 extra students is something we really had to take a look at. And I think we'll be successful there. Transportation it's a huge part of the organization that people don't think about too often. They don't think about till something goes wrong, to your point. So we'll monitor that closely. We went to, I think 3 or 4 years ago, we eliminated one bus. We did have to put it back on. It was overcrowded. We have certain standards we do need to meet there, but I think we'll be successful with this.
Is it helpful at all, I've always wanted to ask this question, to have a local bus company doing the busing?
It's certainly helpful from a customer service standpoint. Salters is great. They're accessible. They understand the community. They are wonderfully proactive in their communication with us. So I think it's been a great relationship over a long period of time.
So we actually have plenty of time. We've covered sort of the broad outlines of this. But I wanted to give each one of you a chance to make points that I haven't asked about. What is being added? I know you're adding some expenses. What's being taken away? What should the people think about when they're coming to the public hearing and when they're going to vote in the referendum? Mary?
Well, thank you, Dominique. I think it's important that people pay attention and look online. Our budget is very transparent. www.simsbury-ct.gov lists our entire budget. So we really want to hear from our taxpayers. What we're talking about here today sounds like it's been relatively easy, but it's not. We've had a lot of very difficult conversations on when you look at presenting a budget that doesn't raise taxes, there's a lot of difficult choices that have to be made. And I think Matt talked about those choices, and where we've gotten really good at is working together, both on the town and Board of Ed side, to look for efficient ways to provide the same service at reduced costs. But we still have to make those difficult choices. We've added back some technology improvements so that we're finding that because of technology, many of our taxpayers are paying online now. They're paying their taxes online. That means we can reduce staffing and put money into other areas. So you'll see an increase in technology. We're going to try to communicate more with our taxpayers online, so we're seeing some more funding for that. We did look at not filling a vacancy on the police department, had a lot of discussion about that, and added that position back into the budget. So we're focusing on economic development, continuing to focus on that. We just completed a marketing plan for the town and streamlined a lot of our economic development processes, so we're seeing the results of that initiative. But I like to say we work on the budget every day in town because we constantly hear from our taxpayers what's working, what's not, and we react, and we do that to save money and to come up with new programs. I've just mentioned the library. I think that's probably one of our areas where we added back funds this year to add a teen librarian. That was a hole that we saw. We weren't meeting the needs of our teenagers. You know, the young kids use the library, older adults use the library, but we want to make sure that we bring the teens back through technology and through something called a maker space, where people can come to the library not only to check out books, but to create. And so our voters and our taxpayers should be looking for some wonderful initiatives in those areas.
Now, another thing is on the capital budget. That's being presented too and going to be talked about. And from our standpoint, the capital budget was presented to us Tuesday night, right? Goes through the process there. It goes from the Board of Ed to the Board of Selectmen. They decide the capital, send it to the Board of Finance, and then we put it onto the voters. And whether it meets a certain criteria, it goes for an individual vote, or we approve it at our meeting. So there's quite a list on the capital projects.
Capital projects meaning things that are being built as opposed to operating budgets.
Yes, things that are being,
Or
well, longer term items that you would bond for, so that,
Right.
that goes into our debt service. And one of our key tenets is we manage our debt policy by a 7% of operating budget. So we don't allow us to overspend on capital items or get into too much debt. And it's worked well for the town. It came up with our forefathers, I don't know when, but they were wise when they set this policy, so it's a good management tool. But the boards have complied with that. We're in compliance, and that was one of our goals. The areas, I know you have safety recommendations in the school. They're moving a couple of offices, I think, are in there.
So the two main things for the Board of Ed have been, they are safety related, as Peter talked about. The front office locations at both Henry James, so if you currently enter Henry James, the front entranceway is down 350, 360 feet, so it would give an intruder full access to the building if they did get in. So when we participated in a security audit after the unfortunate incident in Newtown and really took a look at things, one of the main recommendations was front office location and sightlines, that there's no substitute for sightlines in assisting your security operations. So two schools where that were an issue were Henry James, which I would say is certainly the first priority, and then Squadron Line School, which also doesn't have clean sightlines moving forward. So we work collaboratively to kind of prioritize those projects, and those are what the Board of Ed has put forward this year. So I think that, you know, if we're able to do that, really puts a step in the right direction. And we've done a lot of other things over the course of the year with the Board of Finance's support, with some locks and security film, and we received some grant funding. So I think we've kind of hit a good balance between some what they would call traditional hardening the building ideas for security, but keeping the schools feeling like schools, which I know is really important to our community, and some procedural related things that will help us with security.
It was before your time, but I think both at Tooten Hills and at the high school, the offices were also elsewhere and have been over the years
Correct.
moved.
Right
so
in the front.
Right in the front. Right.
So that capital's in there. Then on the
And then
selectmen
town side, we have the final phase of the Ethel Walker acquisition. That will really complete the town's priority list of acquisitions and bring our open space up to 30% of our town as open space. That will go to referendum. We also had technology initiatives to bring our infrastructure up so that we have the capacity to share even more between the town, the Board of Ed, and with other towns. So technology initiatives, and finally some trail initiatives. Many of our trails, our walking and riding trails were built 30 years ago, so we have a recommendation to upgrade a West Mountain Road through Town Forest Road Park, and to connect the East Coast Greenway piece as well. So those are our big projects that the voters will have a chance to vote on. Yes, it is a bumpy trail.
So, okay, so now we have, each of you has maybe 45 seconds. Bottom line, before the public hearing and the referendum on May 6th, what do you want the people, if they only watch the last 3 minutes of this show, what do you want to tell them?
Vote, come out and vote, come out and have your voice heard. There's still time to change the budgets if you think they're too high or too low, or aren't including something that you think we should know, or we're doing a good job in an area. Please let us know, come out and voice your concerns, make sure you vote, make sure you go online and take a look at the budgets.
You have a little more time.
Yeah, I would say that, as Mary talked about, input is important. And this is an opportunity for input. I think we've had other opportunities along the way with both boards. It continues to be an important part of the process. You know, I feel we've put a budget forward that meets the needs of the school system and the students this year, and does so at a historic low number for the Board of Ed. My overall worry, because you always have one as a superintendent, is that if we don't have the declining enrollment, if that trend changes, other elements change, how can you continue to come in a way that supports the goals of the Board of Finance, but still maintains that high standard? Because I know that that's what I've been hired to do, is to put forward the best school system I can. I think this budget supports that, but you always right away look forward to the future as well, so I'm wary of that.
Okay, 20 seconds, Peter, that's all you get.
All right, well, we're holding the public hearing, our board, so we appreciate if all the residents come out. We love to hear their opinion on what they think of the budget, before we pass it on to the referendum. But from my standpoint, my personal opinion is it's the best I've seen since the 18 years I've been on here. I think it's got a great ending result with no tax increase. I've never been able to say that, so my first time being chair, I guess maybe I'm just lucky and then good sometimes. So I think I really appreciate the hard work that both boards have done to make our job easier, and I think the voters should come out though and listen to what we have, and
Terrific.
we look forward to it.
Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank
We've
you.
just
Thank
about
you.
run out of time. I want to thank everybody here at SCTV, staff as well as volunteers, for helping get this show on the air. And of course, thanks to my guests for their participation. And finally, thank you for joining us. If you missed any portion of the show, you can find it on the website at simsburytv.org. And a reminder that all Boards of Education meetings are live on SCTV on Comcast Channel 95 on the second and fourth Tuesday of the month. I'm Dominique Avery. See you next time for the next edition of Simsbury School News.
Funding for Simsbury Community Television is provided in part by contributions from viewers like you. Thank you.